How's it going, everyone? My name is Masenko, and I am coming to you with a video titled 9 Tips to Improve Your Draft. Now, with Season 3 right around the corner, I figured that I would impart some of the takeaways that I've sort of accumulated over the last 2 seasons of the UGA and other sort of subsidiary draft league experiences that I've had from friends of mine um, on how to think about drafting the mons that you're going to pick. Um, and so, there's not a whole lot of educational content that I see on UGA's server, so I figured, hey, why not? I'll take a shot at it. And if you are interested in this type of content, please let me know so that I can create more of it so that, you can start to conceptualize a little better how you are going to go about strategizing for the UGA, for Draft League, for Pokemon in general. Let's get right into it. So first and foremost, what I like to do is I like to conceptualize my team first. I like to think about sort of a specific idea that works for me. One of the things I say here is that you have to understand your personal play style. And, for me, I think a lot about, what kind of speed tier do I want to be playing in? What kind of Pokemon do I like to play? Do I like to, what kind of modes do I think I might want to use? So these are all a bunch of, sort of thematic considerations, right? And so the reason we kind of start to think about this is, like I say on the slide, is, in doubles and in draft league, you want synergy between your mons. So the first things first sort of step of the process is go, okay, when I'm going to start to pick my mons, I'm going to start to pick stuff that can be good connectors, good mons that can fit into all sorts of different types of, synergize with a bunch of different types of mons and, make sure that's working together. And part of this could also be if you're in the first slot or the last slot of your draft, you can pick 2 mons at once when it comes back to you. Obviously, the first time the first person picks, they only get to pick 1, but you know what I'm saying. You can actually just pick mons that synergize right away. I did this in last season when I picked Venusaur and Ninetales together. So basically, I like to think of an idea, and then the next thing to do is to think about cores, right? So, in general, if you are not aware, a lot of people tend to think that it's important to have certain cores on your team. And specifically what those are is, there's the fire, water, grass core. So you're going to want to have one of each of those on your team at least. There's the fantasy core, which is fairy, dragon, and steel types. You're going to want to have one of those at least on your team each. But more importantly than that is, aside from, securing some of your cores, you want to make sure that those cores work together well. Something that I was sort of showing my buddy Matrix the other day, and my buddy Brian as well, is when you kind of punch in these cores into sort of one of those team sheets that show you all the type weaknesses, you'll notice that one of the things that you see is that these things basically cover each other really well, and this is why we have cores. Fire, water, grass, really the only weakness there, I believe, is flying, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe also poison. And those both come from the grass type that fire and water don't cover, so that's okay. But regardless, what I'm trying to say here is you want to synergize your cores in such a way that the Pokemon that you pick within that core, fire, water, grass, they all are working together for pushing this idea that you've created from the prior point. You don't want to have mons that are setting Tailwind. You pick Talonflame, but then for your water type, you're picking, Jellicent, who's incredibly slow. I don't know if Jellicent's actually that slow, but regardless, Tailwind and Trick Room are kind of almost opposites in terms of what you're trying to go for in terms of speed tiers. So if they're not synergizing well, you're going to not find many opportunities to have them play in the same game covering each other. Now, of course, there are always exceptions to this. And just because they don't synergize doesn't mean you won't succeed. It just means that it'll be easier to field them all together, and you'll have a more cohesive strategy that's working for you just right out the gate. Next, this is a really important one that I learned sort of the hard way last season, was you want to try to plan around shared weaknesses. What I mean by this is when you consider the different types of roles that you see on a team, you have your sort of damaging carries, potential sweepers, they're the ones that are going to be maxing and doing big damage, potentially. You have your sort of support mons, you have sort of defensive, shieldy mons, whatever, there are different types of roles that these fill, and certain mons can fill multiple roles. What I'm trying to say is that when you have a draft team, you have 11 Pokemon, what you want to do is you want to make sure that you understand which Pokemon are going to be generally playing which roles. And one of the things that I sort of messed up on last time was, I picked Zapdos, I also picked Venusaur, and I also picked Flygon. And I'm not 100% sure if I had one more, but one thing you'll notice is that these are all weak to ice, right? And they all, yes, they serve different purposes, but they all kind of fill the same role, right? They're all kind of the Pokemon that I'm looking to potentially max. They're kind of, at least Zapdos and Venusaur are both special attacking carries. So part of the reason this is important is because most of the time I just fielded Venusaur and never really got the opportunity to play Zapdos, because when I go up against somebody who had a particularly strong ice type weakness, I couldn't really use any of them. I kind of had to improvise. But overall, Venusaur kind of, having them both on the team led me to be too weak to this ice type. So yeah, plan around your shared weaknesses. Make sure that if you are going to sub in a carry for a different carry, that they're not, they're not going to be allowing your opponent to just bring one move to deal with both of them, right? You want to make sure that you diversify a little bit more. So for number 4, modes are good, but not that good. What this means is, you've got all sorts of modes. You got your beat up, justified mode. You got your, colossal plus surf or aquajet mode. Stuff like that, right? You have combos that you're doing, or Frostlass Tauros was one that we had last time. But the thing about these modes is really that they are more threatening than they are actually good in practice. In my experience, I like to think of it as the big stick application of modes, where, I don't know if you studied history, Teddy Roosevelt once did a speech about how he speaks softly but carries a big stick. And this basically just means that, it being there is a threat in itself, and it'll affect your opponent's planning around your match with them for their preparation. But because they prep so hard for it, you'll almost never get to actually use it. So ultimately, at the end of the day, in my opinion, this, once again, all of these are just from my personal experience, and not really, other people might have differing opinions, but, and, certain combos are really good. Metagross Spectre is particularly good one, or, Weezing Regigigas, stuff like that. But at the end of the day, the people you're going up against, we're in a draft league, so they're going to be able to prep against that, and if they have something for that, you're almost never going to be able to bring it. So I would personally rather have Pokemon that are flexible and synergize on a more general level that I can bring every time, than Pokemon that only work well in a specific situation that I can only bring some of the time, if not, never. So, number 5. you're going to want to measure flexibility. And so this point is a little bit vague, but basically what I'm trying to say here is that Pokemon kind of go on a range of a spectrum of flexible to sort of situational, right? More niche. So when you're considering whether to pick a Pokemon, you want to make sure that the type of investment it takes to make them work is worth your while. You want to do sort of a cost-benefit analysis when you're picking a Pokemon. So something like Arcanine, for instance, is my go-to when I describe Pokemon being flexible. I mean, this mon could be a bulky Intimidate support. This guy can be a max target for justified beat-up combo. Can just be a good damaging person from the back, slap a choice scarf on it. It got all sorts of roles it can fill. And it really doesn't require much investment to have that Pokemon succeed. So, on the other hand, you look at a Pokemon like, let's say, Excelgor. I like Excelgor a lot, but I mean, there are better Pokemon out there. Where Excelgor really shines is when he's able to support a Pokemon like Palossand. You have that combo. Use his Water Shuriken, maybe even on something like what's it called, Mudsdale, for instance. Stuff like that. But the issue is you probably might not use him that much. I mean, he's more situational, right? So that's kind of what I'm going for here is, just make sure you're aware of these things. Because the thing is like, on the right team, Excelgor can exceed, like, very well. It could be an incredibly powerful Pokemon. But you have to know when to pick it, and you have to know how to build around it. Next up is investing in budget options. So, in Pokemon, you have a sort of a meta, right? And a lot of these, combos that you have will be pretty expensive when in the context of Draft League. You're going to have to spend a lot of points and a lot of slots to get these sort of more meta stuff going for you. But that's not to say that you can't sort of replicate that stuff, right? Obviously last season, Ninetales was in a lower tier than Torkoal. So Ninetales was an incredibly good budget option to pair with something like a Venusaur. Even though Torkoal, by all accounts, generally synergizes with Venusaur better than Ninetales, right? But, you switch it around in this season. You pick Torkoal or Ninetales from the A tier. You can pick a lower ended chlorophyll user, right? You can pick Lilligant. You can pick maybe even Vileplume. Something, maybe that's too bad, but you know what I'm saying, right? There's a lot of different chlorophyll mons out there that could really make use of sun, that are good special attacking grass type sweepers that synergize with Torkoal and Ninetales really well for that reason. They fit the going back to cores, right? That's a fire grass core already. You just need to throw in the water and you already fill that sort of synergizing interesting core. So always consider, is there a mon that can fulfill this role? Maybe slightly worse, but for enough points that it's worth, the difference. Number 7, always keep an open mind. I always run into situations where I'm like, there's no way I'm ever going to think about or pick this mon because of my own preconceptions. Or there's a mon that I look at and I'm like, I really don't feel like this is my kind of mon. While this may be true, and while you should listen to yourself when that happens, always try to push yourself to at least, research the mon and maybe try it out a little bit on Showdown or something to see how it can work. I think this is incredibly helpful, and it's actually led me to pick a lot more Pokemon that I wouldn't have otherwise even thought of. This is a very simple point, but yeah, it probably pretty obvious to most of you, but don't limit yourself when thinking about drafting. Always consider options just from any Pokemon, from any tier. Prioritize lower tiers, and then what I mean by that is, basically, I like to think about what tiers on the lower end are more competitive. We know, honestly, this might be a little bit different for this season. I wrote this slide before we knew the rule set for this season. But basically, the idea here is that, and this kind of goes back to the sort of like thinking about budget options. You're going to run into situations where we all are going to pick an A tier mon, right? We're all going to pick several B tiers, several C tiers. And what you'll notice is that those lower tiers end up becoming much more competitive than the higher tiers, because, as you go down in the tiers, the Pokemon get, objectively worse than the ones in higher tiers. And so if there is only a limited amount of Pokemon within that tier that are actually good, say the D tier, you're going to want to try to get to those pretty quickly before other people have to get to them, because obviously D tier is acquired pick. Now that's not to say, use your first pick on D tier. You could totally use it on an S tier pick, spend 50 points to grab something that you really think is super powerful, that you really want. But as the draft progresses, don't just go in order, I think, is the main point here. Don't just go S tier, A tier, B tier, B tier, try to think about lower tiers and how fast you're going to be able to pick those things before other people snatch them up. Okay, and then finally, trades are your friend. During a draft, nothing is going to be perfect. You only have a certain window of time. Sometimes people will snipe you and you don't really have the best backup option, and so you settle for something that you're not really sure is going to be good. There is a grace window after the draft for 3 trades, so take that opportunity to shore up your team a little bit, and then during the midweek break, week 5, there's going to be a sort of trade bonanza where everyone can just sort of trade however they want for the week. Make use of these periods, because no team is perfect, and especially especially when you are being so limited into what you can pick and other sort of restrictions. So no team is going to be perfect, and even if you do trade, it's probably still not going to be perfect, but you can at least shore up some of your weaknesses that you might have had. And you might have some Pokemon on your team that you thought might be good but didn't fit your overall concept. Now is the time to throw that Pokemon to the wind and pick something that better fits your strategies that you're trying to do. So this is that's the final point. And here's sort of a quick summary if you're interested in taking a screenshot or whatever. Those are some of the considerations that I have during draft. Again, if you like this sort of content, please let me know. I'd be more than happy to continue doing something like this in the future. Feel free to like and subscribe, all that jazz. Much love to all of you, and have a wonderful draft season. Bye now.